You walk into a room, feeling completely fine. Within 60 seconds, something shifts. A heaviness settles behind your sternum, a low-grade unease you cannot name. And almost immediately, your mind does what it has been trained to do. It turns inward and asks, "What is wrong with me?" That question is the first mistake, and it is costing you everything. Jung identified this phenomenon with clinical precision. He found that certain individuals possess what he called an emotional field perception, a nervous system so finely calibrated that it functions less like a mind and more like a receiver tower. You are not generating that heaviness. You are detecting it. You are picking up the frequency of the room, the unspoken grief of the person across from you, the suppressed rage sitting behind someone's polite smile, and your body is registering it as sensation, not as information, as identity. That is the catastrophic error. It is not an emotional breakdown. It is perceptual data you were never meant to carry. The signal was designed to pass through you, to inform you, orient you, and then release. Not take up permanent residence inside you, not become the emotional wallpaper of your daily life. Jung's correction was devastatingly simple. The moment you feel that shift, you stop and ask one question: is this mine? Not a long inquiry. Not a therapy session with yourself in a parking lot. 3 words that interrupt the absorption before it completes, before your nervous system files someone else's emotional state under your name. Because here is what years of not asking that question have produced. You have been metabolizing other people's emotional waste as though it were your own autobiography. You have built an entire self-concept, including your fears, your moods, your sense of what is possible around experiences that were never yours to begin with. You are not unstable. You are unfiltered. Not a liability, an unguided instrument that has never been shown its own operating manual. And that distinction matters enormously, because the moment you learn to observe rather than absorb, something far more unsettling becomes visible. You start to see things people are trying very hard to hide. You have known, within seconds, that someone was going to hurt you. Not suspected, not feared, known. Something in the handshake, the laugh, the slight delay before the answer, and your entire system quietly sounded an alarm that you then spent the next 6 months talking yourself out of. And you did talk yourself out of it, because you were taught to. Don't judge people so quickly. Give them a chance. You don't even know them yet. Every social script you were handed pointed in the same direction. Override the knife. Signal, perform generosity, and wait patiently for the evidence that your body already held with complete certainty. Jung called this an act of self-betrayal. He documented that empathic individuals perform what he described as an unconscious high-speed assembly, an instantaneous synthesis of micro-expressions, vocal inconsistencies, postural contradictions, and energetic fluctuations that the conscious mind hasn't even begun to process. Your nervous system runs this calculation faster than language, faster than logic, faster than the other person has finished arranging their opening impression. And it delivers a verdict before a single word has been consciously analyzed. This is not intuition in the mystical sense. It is pattern recognition at a speed most humans cannot access. It is not being judgmental. It is acting on accurate data before the lie is even told. The cruelty is that you were socialized to treat your most sophisticated survival mechanism as a character flaw requiring correction. Every time you honored that knowing and someone called you closed off or unfair or too sensitive, you filed it as evidence against yourself. You learned to apologize for your own accuracy. You began performing open-mindedness as a way of managing other people's comfort at the direct expense of your own safety. And the relationships that followed that apology, the ones you entered despite the alarm, the ones you stayed in long after the verdict had been confirmed, you already know how those ended. You lived through the slow, exhausting process of watching your first read prove itself correct while you pretended to be surprised. Jung was unambiguous. The empath who overrides their first read in order to appear generous is not being kind. They are being compliant. And compliance in the face of a clear internal warning is not a virtue. It is the slow dismantling of your own discernment. But here is where it deepens considerably. Because you are not only detecting deception in what people do, you are beginning to see what they are carrying underneath the behavior, entirely wounds they have never shown anyone, darkness they have constructed an entire personality to conceal. You have loved people for who they could be and paid for it with years of your life. You saw the wound beneath the anger, the loneliness behind the arrogance, the frightened child operating inside the difficult adult. You saw it clearly, often from the very beginning, and that sight did something powerful to you. It activated something that felt like purpose, like calling, like the specific reason you were built this particular way. Jung had a precise name for what you were seeing. He called it the shadow, the unintegrated emotional material that people bury so deeply they eventually lose conscious access to it entirely. The rage that never found a safe container, the grief that hardened into control, the emptiness that learned to perform confidence so convincingly that even the person wearing it forgot the performance had begun. And you, with your particular sensory wiring, walk directly through the persona and land on the wound every single time. That ability is real, documented, significant. What you were taught to do with it is where the destruction begins. Because somewhere along the way, you absorbed a belief that seeing someone's pain creates an obligation to heal it, that your awareness of their wound makes you personally responsible for their wholeness, that to walk away from someone whose shadow you can clearly see is a form of abandonment, a betrayal of your sensitivity's highest purpose. And so you stayed. You softened your boundaries incrementally until they disappeared. You poured yourself into people who were not asking to be healed, they were asking to be enabled, to have someone present who would absorb the consequences of their unexamined interior life without ever demanding they look at it. It is not a rescue mission. It is a protective warning. The shadow you are perceiving is not a blueprint for your involvement. It is intelligence, precise, urgent, and deeply personal that this person carries unfinished interior work that they have not yet chosen to confront. Your sight does not transfer that labor onto you. It simply confirms you are paying attention at a level most people cannot. Not seeing too much, receiving information you were designed to act on, not dissolve into. Jung was stark about the consequence. The empath, who confuses witnessing with saving, does not rescue the wounded person. They simply add themselves to the casualty list. Seeing clearly is the gift. Staying anyway, believing your presence alone, can complete someone else's unstarted work. That is the misuse. And yet, even when you begin to finally trust what you see in the present moment, something stranger is already happening beneath your awareness. You are also sensing things that have not arrived yet. There was a moment in a relationship, a job, a friendship, when you felt it end before it ended. Not a fear, not a pessimistic thought you were working to suppress. A quiet, cellular, knowing that what you were standing inside had already concluded at some fundamental level. The structure was still upright. People were still showing up. The calendar was still scheduled months into a future that your body had already quietly declined to believe in. And then you did what you were conditioned to do. You called it anxiety. You accused yourself of self-sabotage. You found a therapist, a journal, a mantra, a new strategy for staying anything to explain away what you were perceiving, so you could continue performing hope in a situation. Your entire nervous system had already, calmly and completely, exited. Jung identified this as one of the most sophisticated and most systematically suppressed abilities in the empathic profile. He described it as trajectory perception, the capacity to detect subtle pattern disruptions so early and so accurately that the conscious mind hasn't yet assembled them into a coherent narrative. A fractional change in tone, a barely perceptible withdrawal of energy, a rhythm that has shifted by a degree no instrument in the room can measure except you. Your nervous system measures it, and it extrapolates forward with an accuracy that should, by now, no longer surprise you. It is not negativity. It is foresight, designed specifically to give you a head start before the collapse becomes visible to everyone else. The particular cruelty is in what you were instructed to do with that lead time. Hold on. Invest more. Don't abandon ship. Every cultural narrative around loyalty and commitment pointed toward remaining longer, giving more, waiting for external confirmation of an internal verdict that had already been delivered with quiet finality. So you waited, and the wreckage arrived precisely where, and precisely when, you already knew it would. Not because you were pessimistic, because you were accurate. Jung named this hope as self-abandonment, the weaponization of optimism against your own intelligence. Remaining not because you genuinely believed in transformation, but because leaving felt like a confession that your sensitivity had seen something real, and you were not yet ready to honor it. Trusting your trajectory perception is not cynicism. It is not the absence of faith. It is the first serious act of loyalty to yourself you may have ever attempted. But perceiving the truth across all four of these channels, in real time, across every environment you enter, means nothing sustainable if you return each night to a baseline that has been contaminated by everything you witnessed that day. That is the final stage, and it is the one that makes every other ability not just possible but permanent. By the end of most days, you do not know who you are, not in a dramatic sense, in a quiet, disorienting one. You sit down alone in a room and realize you cannot locate your own emotional state beneath the accumulated weight of everything you have processed since morning. Someone else's tension is still living in your shoulders. A conversation from 4 hours ago is still completing itself in your chest. A stranger's grief from a brief encounter is somehow still present, unnamed, sitting just below your sternum, like something you forgot to return. You are alone, and yet the room is still full. This is not emotional instability. It is not evidence of weakness or poor mental health. It is the measurable, predictable cost of a sophisticated instrument that was never given an off switch and never taught that one was necessary. Jung documented that empathic individuals possess what he called somatic resonance, a nervous system that does not merely register the emotional states of others intellectually, but entrains to them at a physiological level. Like two tuning forks placed in proximity, your system synchronizes automatically, instinctively, without your conscious permission. It is the biological architecture beneath every profound human connection, and deployed by conscious choice, in the right context, with the right person. It is an extraordinary relational instrument. The problem is that it was never engineered to operate without interruption. It is not being cold to disengage it deliberately. It is not emotional unavailability or spiritual bypassing. It is maintaining your own baseline frequency so that you are not silently, invisibly governed by the emotional weather of every environment you move through. Jung developed what he called conscious return, deliberate, repeatable practices for re-establishing the perceptual boundary between what you have absorbed and what is authentically, originally yours. Not the construction of walls, not retreat into isolation. A reset, a methodical return to your own signal after a period of necessary contact with someone else's. Without it, the instrument degrades. An empath operating without regular access to their own baseline does not become more attuned over time. They become reactive, increasingly destabilized, and progressively unable to distinguish their own perception from the accumulated residue of everyone they have encountered. This is not a spiritual practice reserved for retreat centers and quiet mornings. It is operational maintenance for a nervous system doing extraordinary work in an ordinary world. Because every capacity illuminated in this conversation, the field perception, the truth detection, the shadow recognition, the trajectory reading, every single one, depends on the same non-negotiable foundation. That you know, with clarity and reliability, what you feel like when none of it is present. That is your true north, your original frequency. And without consistent, practiced return to it, you are not an empath wielding 5 refined abilities. You are simply someone who feels everything and owns none of it. The question now is not whether these abilities are real. You already know they are. The question is what you choose to do, beginning today, with the understanding that they were never meant to diminish you.